Hello, I'm Mike Levine. I am the president and founder of Happy Giant. I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. I'd like to thank the museum for having us. I'd like to thank Sakai for flying 3,000 miles to come to this. I kind of feel like I'm the warm-up act at the concert, so I'll try to be brief. And I'm a huge Usagi fan as well, and that's kind of what led me to make this game. So I'm just going to start with just a brief overview of history of who we are and kind of how we got here. So Happy Giant is a video game company based in Massachusetts. I am based out in Western Massachusetts. We're focused on mobile, cross-platform, social games, high-quality games with story, and great characters. So my background, in the 90s, I fled to California for reasons unknown and got a job working for George Lucas, worked at LucasArts most of the 90s on some classic PC games, Full Throttle, Jedi Knight, The Dig, and I also joked, I worked on the original Sam & Max, and I joked that must have been where I started this lifelong love affair with comic book bunnies and turning them into video games. Then I formed a company when I moved back to Massachusetts called Affiliated Pictures that did a lot of service work for Hasbro and the music industry, some big projects from Littlest Pet Shop to Transformers. The company is made up of veterans of the gaming industry. I've been in it for 20 years, and we have people from Hasbro, Atari, BioWare, and other companies. We've worked with some of the biggest brands in the world. Since we started Happy Giant last summer, we did the app for the Sacha Baron Cohen film, The Dictator. It was kind of a South Parkian adaptation of these Olympic Games that he would have in the film if anyone saw it. And as Barbara mentioned, somehow we hooked up with Jay-Z and we did a Facebook game, worked closely with him and his team, sort of recreating his life, Brooklyn and all these various cities. We also have what I call a high-end pet simulation app. It's a gorgeous 3D experience with a dolphin and orca and other creatures and set in a tropical environment. Kids love it, moms love it, etc. And I love it. From Jay-Z to dolphins to Usagi, that's mine. We also made a sequel based on this called Orca Paradise, which is very similar, set in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. And a couple of years ago, we made an original adventure game called Insecticide, which I still get lots of emails about that are very in-depth world and characters and story. Okay, so Usagi Yojimbo. So, how did this all happen? So I've been a huge comic book fan my entire life. I was in high school when The Dark Knight and Watchmen came out, and really this had tremendous influence on everything I went on to do. I loved Frank Miller, I read Ronin, I read Lone Wolf and Cub, but amazingly, I really didn't know Usagi that well. A couple years ago, a big comic book friend of mine, handed me a stack of the comics and said, "You need to read these." And after book 1, I was in love, and after book 2 or 3, I was like, okay, we have to turn this into a game. And so I contacted Dark Horse, and when things are meant to happen, sometimes they happen very smoothly, and this was one of these cases. So the game came out in February. It has an average of a 4+ rating, which is fantastic. And our goal with this game really was to bring the comic book to life. We wanted to stay true to the comic. We wanted the fans of the comic to appreciate it, that we were fans, saw the details that we wanted to put into it, and that's what a lot of the reviews have said since the game came out, so that's been great. It's a 2D, old-school, side-scroller, brawler, button masher, call it what you will. It's a fairly simple game meant to be fun for old and young people. We didn't want to make something overly complex that people would not be able to get past the first couple levels on. The game also features a very rich story that we worked with Stan on, made sure he was cool with everything, which I'll get into in a little bit. right now it's out on iOS and Android, mobile and tablets, and hope to bring it to desktops soon. If there's any Steam users out there, vote for us on green light. So early on in the process, when we just really started the game, we had the wonderful opportunity to go to Comic-Con in San Diego and hang out with Stan and Dark Horse. Stan, I can't say enough good things about, I'll get back to him, but Dark Horse has also been just fantastic throughout this. But going to Comic-Con and meeting these fans and seeing the generations, seeing parents pass it down to the kids, you know, I kind of went into Comic-Con really excited, and I left somewhat petrified, realizing the tremendous responsibility we had to this property and how serious people took Usagi. So it was really important that we did that early on and sort of saw that interaction and love that the fans had. So here is an early promo to the game. So when we started in the early development, we always start with pre-production and concept art and research. And we've worked with a lot of big brands over the years. Sometimes you don't get much reference, you have to really hunt for it. But with this, it was really a pleasure. I mean, Stan has, over 28 years, laid out the sort of ultimate art Bible from not only the comics, but the sketchbooks. And so we really studied, and if you look at the game and the material we made for it, we studied Stan's work, and we really took his poses and his characters and really tried to make it come to life in the comic, just as it was in the actual comic books. And when we couldn't find the inspiration from Stan's art, of course, there was the fan art. So we would find extra details and information. There's such a big community of support for Usagi out there. So we would start with sketches, just like Stan does in the early days, just trying to figure out poses and how this character was going to live inside this world that we were going to create for him, that was going to live on these phones and mobile devices. After sketches, we would move to color, where we would try different variations, kind of hard to see on the monitor, but playing around with the color, especially the line quality, which would have a very big effect on how it would look on the phones due to certain technical limitations. And then, all the while, of course, we were showing this to Stan, getting his feedback. After that, we would start to take the character and put it into games that, because we didn't have background yet, so we would put it into similar games that we would like, just to make sure it would work and match up and look cool. From there, we refined the character further. We gave him the right sword after Stan pointed out he had the wrong sword. And refined him and got the sort of look to where we wanted it. And then we started to put him into our own environments. Started to develop more of the characters, Nico ninjas, Gen, etc. So the game has a large fighting component to it, and it also has a large story component as well. In the game are 7 comic book cutscenes. And in games, when we say cutscenes, which was a term actually invented when I was at LucasArts, apparently, little did I know at the time, but it really just means the story section of the games where you're not interacting with it. And so for those sections, we wanted to really make an animated comic book. And so we would start with simple storyboards, turning them into animatics, moving storyboards, and from there, it would turn into something like this. This is actually the opening cutscene to the game, which sets the story that Usagi is about to go on. So we can just watch this briefly. I'm guessing most of you are familiar with the comics. We came to a pretty epic story because we kind of needed an excuse, because we wanted so many of Usagi's enemies and villains that he faced over the years to be able to face him in this game. So we kind of came to the conclusion that we needed a pretty epic plot to justify so many of the enemies coming after him. I was sure Stan was going to say, no way, don't do that, but of course he was incredibly supportive and gave us feedback, and the story involves, it's related to Grasscutter, which is one of my favorite Usagi books, and it involves the 3 sacred objects of Japan. So it's a pretty big task of the story that we took on, and I'm really happy of how it came out. So I'm also really proud of the amazing array of characters that we made for this game, or adapted into this game. And these were really the exact sheets that we would send to Stan for approval. Just to give you a glimpse of some of the characters, to show some of them scroll by here, you can get a sense. This is just probably about a quarter of the total characters in the game. And you can see most of the poses and way they're looking is really pulled right from the comics. From the Nui to various enemies, boss monsters as well, and Stan actually let us even create some original characters for this game, which I was very appreciative that he let us do, so I guess we have invented some new characters in our own way into the Usagi universe. So next I'm going to talk briefly about how we animated all this stuff, because it represented a pretty unique challenge to do this. Games have really, I see a lot of 3D in games now, and a lot of 3D tools made, and with mobile devices you have to be really efficient about file size and how you animate things so your games don't get too big. So what we really did was take 2D art and convert it to 3D to animate, and then convert it back to 2D. We would start with pictures just like this, different poses, turnarounds, etc. of the character. And then these, by the artist, get broken up into something like this. So all the different parts can be animated. Then something like this is given to a 3D artist who arranges it into what's called an atlas, which can be used in a 3D program. We used Maya for this extensively. So the challenge we faced here was keeping this art in Stan's style, having it run acceptably on a mobile device. So really, we didn't have a choice that we could sort of hand animate this, the sort of old-fashioned cell animation frame by frame. So by breaking up the art and putting what's called bones into it, I'm not going to get overly technical here, we can have questions later, which I may or may not be able to answer. But we put bones into the body of this character, and not real bones, 3D bones, which essentially act as marionette sort of puppet controls to let you animate the character. because this is a 3D program, if we were to tilt the camera around, you can see that he's really still made up in separate parts. And so when the camera comes back to the front, it's more like we know Usagi to be, obviously, and all of those controls in there would give the animators the ability to animate the character as you see it in the final game. So now I'm going to talk briefly about some of the background art in the game. We had some fantastic background art done by a local artist, Jenny Blacars, and I think she did a great job. And as always, we start with the comics. So we would do our research. This is one of my favorite Usagi comics where he goes to a seaweed village. And we would study everything about the pictures, what Stan put in there, looking at the details, the boats, etc. And then we would make our level. And so first we would start with a black and white sketch level with notes in it. And once that was as we needed it, and we would try out the characters in it in the game, then it would be converted to color. And when we were starting this out in this process, I admit I was kind of intimidated to make Usagi art in color because so many of the books traditionally have been done in black and white. But once I saw the results Jenny was coming up with and saw Stan's approval of it, I was really happy with how it came out. As you play the game, the tones is actually from the beginning, but there's a sort of color palette change. It starts out very bright and sunny, but towards the end of the game, things get very dark and stormy and a little more dangerous. There's one more. This is one towards the end of the game. So, working with the Museum of Fine Arts. So, I got contacted by the museum when we were kind of in mid-production of the game, and we kept talking, sort of formulated this great cross-promotion strategy, and it was really just wonderful to work with them again. I can't thank them enough, and I'm excited as all you guys to see the exhibit today and the samurai. And what we did was we were able to take the signature piece from the exhibit and kind of Usagi-fy it. And so in the game, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to give out the code now or people can get it here, but you can get it here somewhere. It's an adventure game. You have to find it in the museum. But if you find the code, it unlocks a special bonus level where Usagi plays with this armor. He has extra defensive capabilities, and it was really great to team up with them and sort of have real armor and samurai armor on Usagi, and real sort of history involved with it. So. And that is the conclusion of our Usagi talk. I was just going to give you guys a sneak preview of our next game, which is going to be called